Hello and welcome. This edition has 10 differences between J1 and H1 visas. So my YouTube channel is Rashid Mzee. Please consider subscribing to it, okay? So which visa is suitable for you and your folk? And that's our agenda of the day. And an introduction is that H1 and J1 are different visa types. They are one is a non-immigrant, one is an immigrant. We shall look at it. And here are 10 differences that you can talk about when you look at the visas. So the first one is the purpose. So J1 is primarily for participating in work and study and exchange, cultural exchange activities, okay? So things like teachers, doctors, students, trainees, nurses, those who come in for a few years and then they go back to their home country, they fit into the J1 because the idea is they share the experiences that they got here back to their country and they bring the experiences from their country to this place. Now, the H1B is for individuals employed in specialty occupations. Also, it's the same jobs, but in this case, this is a work visa. So when you're employed with a H1B visa, it's actually a work visa, okay? Now, the second thing is sponsorship. J1 requires sponsorship by a university, private sector, or government program that is designated by the US Exchange Visa Program, which is the service. It's called the service. And H1B is given by the employer. So the employer has to file a labor condition and then you have to work with a lawyer. So for the J1, you are given something called a DS 2019 or 2019. But for a H1B, you have to work with a lawyer who will file in some paperwork. It takes a while. They will process it. And some are capped, some are not capped. We shall talk about that in a minute. But then the two have different sponsors. So if you want to know whether your sponsor is your J1 sponsor is one of the available sponsors, then you can go to Bridge USA, type in Bridge USA, and look through the sponsors in there. Then you'll know whether they are sanctioned to work with J1 visas. Okay. And for H1B, I can't really tell, but what you can do is you can talk to your lawyer. Usually, the schools will tell you, or the organization that is bringing you with a H1B visa, they would contact a lawyer and the lawyer would contact you, and then you'd be able to proceed. Okay. Now, duration of stay. For the J1, it really depends on what program it is. If it's a teacher program like the ones that we are promoting, then you will stay for 3 years and then it can be renewed for a further 2 years. Now, the ideal thing is that usually it is 3 years, renewed for 2 years, and then you go back to your home country for 2 years, and then you're eligible to apply again. So you go, it is 5 years, you go back to your home country for 2 years, and then come back and do it another 5 years, like another 3 years, renew 2 years, go back 2 years, implement it back home, like that until you get tired. Okay. But for H1B, it's initially granted for up to 3 years. Sometimes it's 1 year, but initially they give you 3 years, then they extend it for another 3 years. So usually it goes to a maximum of 6 years, but sometimes they can go further. They can do like increments of 1 year until you get into another type of visa situation where maybe you're getting into permanent residency or stuff like that. Okay. Now, home residency requirement. Now, remember, I told you that if you have gotten your J1, then you have to go back to your home country for another 2 years and then come back for another session of the J1. Now, for the J1, there is a physical presence requirement after the program ends. You have to be physically present in your home area unless you get a waiver from your home country. But most sponsors, once you get a waiver, they will not take you back for J1. Now for H1B visa, there's no such requirement. So there's a smoother path to applying for permanent residency if you decide. Okay. Now, visa cap. J1 generally does not have a total number of people that they want to bring in, so they can bring as many as they want. But some programs, they are capped according to like the specific programs. For example, if you're talking to company A, they may only be told you can only bring 200 or 300 people. But H1B has an annual cap for the entire state. So the annual cap is currently at about 65,000, and an additional 20,000 for master's degree holders or higher. So if you have a master's degree, usually you have more chances because you are in the pool of 65,000 and an additional 20,000. Okay, so master's, PhD, and all that, they all fall under the H1B visa cap. But if you're coming in, there's some employment situations where you don't are not subject to the cap. For example, teachers are not subject to that. They don't get into the lottery, so that is not subject to the cap. But if you're going into other professions, then it is subject to that cap. Now, dependents. This is where it starts getting interesting. J1 dependents are called J2. J2 can get authorization to work and to study. So a J2 can work, a J2 can study, a J2 can go about their life the way they want. Okay. H1 dependents are called H4, but H4 can study but do not work. They do not have work authorization. It is for now. There's a lot of legality involved, and people are in courts and all that. But generally, H4 will not be working. So now when you're choosing a visa type, this is a very important aspect because remember that the life in the US is not one person managing the finances is a very difficult thing. So you have to consider whether if you come in and your spouse is a J2, they can work and maybe you share the bills. Even though J2 when they work, it's not supposed to be for sharing the bills in the house, but that is the reality. But H1, you have to be working and paying all the bills for your family. So that's a very difficult thing. Okay. Now, next thing is educational requirement. J1 is it varies because some have diplomas, some have degrees, and for the teacher education they have degrees because of the requirement of the state that you have a degree or the requirement of the country that you have a degree. But for the H1, they must hold at least a bachelor's degree or an equivalent of the bachelor's degree on the occupation for which they are being hired. So if you do not have a bachelor's degree, maybe perhaps you do not qualify for a H1B. But if you have a equivalent to a bachelor's, maybe you did your diploma and then you did something and then your certificates and all that, and now it is equivalent to a bachelor degree, then you will qualify for H1. As long as you explain your circumstance, then you can qualify. Okay. Now the next thing is work authorization. For the J1, you are authorized to work only under the terms of the exchange program, which is written on the DS 2019. And that is where they say this person is authorized to be maybe a teacher or a doctor or a nurse or whatever it is. And that is what you have to do. Okay. For the H1B, the visa holder is authorized to work for the sponsoring employer in the specific job described in the visa petition. So when you're giving H1B visas, for the J1, you're authorized to work in the terms of the exchange program. That is, it might be that you're going to be a teacher. But for the H1B, they will say specifically this will be a teacher teaching in X school for this subject. And that is what you have to stick to. You cannot like deviate from that. Okay. Work authorization is very strict in these visas, both of them. Then portability. If you're changing jobs, J1 is very restricted. because the program sponsor has to approve why you're changing and whether it is feasible to change and whether there's a vacancy, and if the other vacancy they also have a J1, because the sponsors have, they have some benefits from this program, and they would not want to make you go to a place where they're not going to be paid. But H1B, you can change employers. Okay, you can just change employers. If you're tired of this employer, you can go to another one, and they will give you another H1B. They will file for you a new H1B, and once that H1B is out, then you can be able to work. Okay, so that is very good. Portability is a very good thing with H1B, but for J1, you're stuck with, most of the time you're stuck with your program sponsor unless you go back home for the 2 years, and then you can change. Okay, and then there is the path to permanent residency. J1 is not does not have the path, because J1 it has a 2-year country physical presence requirement, which means you have to go back to your country. However, H1B can be used as a stepping stone to permanent residency, especially for those in long-term specialty occupations. Okay, if you have a occupation that has chronic it is usually having chronic how you call it, shortages, then it is easy for your sponsoring organization to sponsor you for a green card so that you have your green card. I hope this has made you more knowledgeable, and come back for more, because I will be giving more videos every day.